Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast, Is Anybody Out There? I'm your host, Sophie.
And I'm Rachel.
And this is the podcast where I try to scare her. I don't really think... It's not scary. It's actually going to be pretty gory. I've tried to make it not as graphic as it could be, but warning, there might be a little gore coming at you. But I don't think it's really scary. It's more sad today.
Yeah. This time, I do know what we're talking about beforehand. I will spoil that. Because she just told me.
Yeah, she knows like a little bit about what we're talking
I know
about,
just like the basic idea of what we're doing, and it is sad.
Yeah, but
it's important.
So this Thursday is Thanksgiving, right? So, So the day after Thanksgiving is actually Native American Heritage Day. So I wanted to shed some light on a Native American or Indigenous problem that's been happening in America and especially in Canada, and that is the problem of women going missing and little to nothing being done about it, even though people are putting in missing reports and wanting these women to be found.
Well, I feel like unless maybe you are an Indigenous person, you wouldn't have even heard about it. Mm-hmm. Like, I haven't even heard of most of these cases. I mean, we haven't talked about any of them yet, but I didn't even know that this was a problem, I guess is what I'm trying to say, until you told me.
And I
didn't know it was more than like, American citizens. I didn't know that it was more than that. Oh,
yeah, it is more than that. And I do want to say, we're not Indigenous. I don't believe we have any Native American heritage in our line, maybe a little, but we're not trying to claim that, but we did want to honor the memory of these people.
Yeah, and thinking with Thanksgiving coming up, too, like, we wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for them, because they were the ones who helped the Pilgrims grow the crops to survive and everything, so.
Thank you, and let's get right into it. So, we're going to be talking specifically about one case that I think really emphasizes this problem, but there have been many more than just this one. We're going to be talking about the serial killer, Robert Willie Pickton, and he liked to go by Willie, and we're going to call him Willie. So,
I don't like that.
Yeah, he's
I don't
real
like
icky.
that his name is Willie, and he's a serial killer, and women have gone missing.
He's real icky.
None of that, just, it's, ugh.
Yeah. This case, the Willie Pickton case, really showcases how the police weren't super enthusiastic to help these missing Indigenous people. And part of it is because they were sex workers and they were drug addicts and they were just poverty-stricken. And the police, on top of them being Indigenous, they just didn't care about them.
So do you think the police might have thought this is just what they deserve? Almost? I'm not saying that. Like, I don't think they would say that. But is that kind of the idea that this gives off? Like, these people weren't worth it, is what it seemed, because they would not go and look for them?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I do think that that is part of it, yeah. And I can't say for certain, that the police didn't do their best. And we are going to be looking at this case from a perspective of the future. We're looking back on this case. So we kind of have a bias of, well, this could have been done better. We see that there's definitely a serial killer happening, but when things were going on in the moment, I'm sure it was much more difficult for them to piece all these things together. So I'm not trying to say that the police didn't, try or anything like that. I'm for the police. I think that for the most part, most of them are trying to do a good job. But I just think that there is just an underlying bias against these people. Even if they don't realize it, it's just been kind of ingrained. And so this case just really shows it, and we're gonna get into talking about it. So let's just get it over with.
All right.
Let's get it over with. In 1997, an elderly couple out for a drive is shocked and horrified to see a young woman covered in blood and with handcuffs dangling from one of her wrists, screaming and stumbling toward their car, begging to be let in.
Okay, I'm actually gonna interrupt right there. I know I'm leaving on a cliffhanger, but I have actually thought of what I would do in a situation like this, because it was in, I think, a philosophy class that I took, that we had to learn about this incident that happened where, like, this person could have been prevented from being murdered. She was attacked, got away. People saw, people saw and looked out of their apartment windows, but thought, like, okay, someone else is going to intervene.
Oh, man.
And that was kind of like, I think what the psychology class was trying to say was that, like, there is this, like, someone else will do it mindset a lot of times, and that's really terrible for, you know, if you're a victim of a crime. But
bystander effect, I think is what they call it.
Yes, that's what it is. Thank you. And so after I watched that video, it really did make me think, like, well, if I saw someone bloody, screaming, coming over to me, to be honest, I don't think I'd want to be involved. Because I think I'd be like, okay, well, isn't it better if I leave and, like, get someone else who probably has more skills than me, or has a gun, or, like, something to figure out the situation? Like, I might try to hear them out, but I don't think I would, like, let them in, and I think that's terrible. But I don't think I would. I can understand these elderly people being shocked.
Honestly, I don't think I would either. And she actually, I didn't put it in that sentence, but she actually was holding a knife as well. And
I'd be like, no way, speed up.
I feel like what I would do is speed up and then call the police and say, I just saw this. This is where I saw it. Can you go help her? Something's definitely not right. Yeah. But I don't think I would let her get in the car. I mean, you just never know. That's the thing. You never know.
People are crazy. A lot of stuff we've talked about on this podcast just shows that.
Yeah.
You know, people are crazy.
This could be a person, and there have been people who will pose as victims and then get, so you just never know. But, you know, the more human part of me does want to say that I would help her, but I think that it's fine to say that you would help her by calling the police.
Yeah, I think so too.
And getting the proper authorities involved. I think that's acceptable. But this elderly couple, they actually do let her in the car.
Wow.
Yeah. So that woman was Wendy Lynn Eistetter. She was a sex worker from the part of Vancouver known as the Downtown East Side. This couple takes her in the car and they take her to the hospital where she's examined and treated for multiple stab wounds. One of the stab wounds had, like, exposed her bowels, and she was
oh my gosh,
they were really, really bad. She was in the hospital for weeks. The hospital was really busy that night, but nurses would notice that another victim of a stabbing had also come in. This man, whose name was Robert Willie Pickton, claimed that a sex worker had assaulted him, but the key in his pocket told a different story. It was the key to the handcuffs that were stuck on Wendy's wrist.
Oh my word.
She survived somehow, miraculously, and testified at the 2003 preliminary inquiry that after driving her to his Port Coquitlam farm and having sex with her, Pickton slapped a handcuff on her left wrist and stabbed her in the abdomen.
Oh my gosh.
The two had fought, and she also had stabbed Pickton.
Wait, how did she get a knife?
There was a knife in the kitchen, and so he was sort of caressing her hand, and then just really quickly slapped this handcuff on her. And she started freaking out.
Yeah.
And she knew that she had seen a knife in the kitchen.
Oh
so
my
she,
goodness.
like, pushes him away and is just fighting him with her hands, goes to grab the knife, and she grabs the knife, and then they just get in sort of a struggle.
Oh, so it's one knife. She doesn't have another knife. Okay.
Yeah. No, she doesn't have another knife.
Because I was like, whoa, she just keep that with her? Because that'd be good.
No, they go back and forth with it, kind of, you know, they're fighting, so it's... So later, both she and Pickton were treated at the same hospital, where the staff used this key that they found in his pocket to remove the handcuffs from her wrist.
Crazy.
This attempted murder charge against Pickton was actually stayed on January 27th, 1998, because the woman had drug addiction issues, and prosecutors believed her too unstable to testify.
That is awful. Like, that makes me upset.
Isn't that just...
So just because she had drugs in her, they all were sure, like, you know, pretty sure he was the murderer, and still that part didn't really matter as much.
Attempted murder.
Attempted murder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. She had drugs, so they couldn't do anything, which is just unbelievable, really, because she was in the hospital for weeks with stab wounds. Other people can corroborate that she was stabbed. She didn't do this to herself. There was no way that it could have been drug related. The fact that she had drugs in her system, while it may have impaired her judgment in going with him in the first place, it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that he was stabbing her.
He stabbed her.
Right.
And handcuffed her.
And her wounds were much worse than his. Which I think is significant.
I think so, too.
So this just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sorry, authorities, but I'm really not. The clothes and rubber boots that Pickton had been wearing were seized by police, and they were just left in a storage locker for more than 7 years.
Oh my word.
Not until 2004 did lab testing show that the DNA of 2 missing women were on these items that were seized from Pickton in 1997.
They didn't even test it for 7 years?
For 7 years, they didn't do anything with it.
Wow.
In Vancouver, Canada, women were going missing at an alarming rate. If the vanished women did not return alive or show up in another city, they did not return at all. They just disappeared into thin air. Many, if not most, of these missing women were Indigenous. The first rash of missing women happened in the 70s, which was before Willie's time. But it was always the same. Women would go missing and nothing would be done. As the Pickton case unfolded, with its many Indigenous victims, it focused public attention on the wider issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. This, in turn, led to a national government inquiry into the issue, which began in 2016. Vancouver's police department was extremely slow to take interest in the vanishing women, and when they finally did, they had next to nothing to go on. They had no bodies, no physical evidence, they couldn't perform any autopsies. The lack of bodies, coupled with the police department's prejudices and contempt for the pimps, the drug dealers, addicts, the sex workers
that whole
of
situation,
Vancouver,
that whole scene,
made it really easy for a killer to stalk his prey in this area without fear of being caught.
Yeah.
There was a rumor of a serial killer spreading through this part of town, which was known as the Downtown East Side, but no one was saying it in so many words. Quote, "The women here don't talk about it very much because they're so scared," end quote, said Elaine Allen, who is the executive director of the Women's Information Safe House, a drop-in center for sex trade workers. Quote, "Some women believe it's a border hopper, perhaps even the infamous Green River Killer who did his dirty work in the northwestern United States, or a lethal merchant marine crew kidnapping the women and murdering them at sea. Others just try not to think about it at all," end quote. And that Women's Information Safe House, that was a place where the sex workers could come in and just hang out with each other. It was a safe space for them.
So it wasn't like a recovery center where they were trying to get out of being sex workers. They were just having a place to be safe.
Yes, basically, because I think the people that were working at Wish, as it was known, they understood, they were trying to help them with their addictions, but they understood that it was not just a quick fix, so they were helping them with smaller problems in the meantime. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
They would help them with food and giving them things like shampoo and just, coffee and camaraderie.
Right. Getting them ready to that place to make the decision to, change.
Exactly. The Downtown East Side is a very poor neighborhood. It's known for its high rates of homelessness, open drug use, and prostitution. In the late 1990s, 80% of the girls and women working in the sex trade came from outside Vancouver. And I say girls because they had girls as young as 11.
Oh my word.
Working sex work on the streets. And some of these had not had contact with their families for years. Years and years. Which makes it complicated when you're looking for a missing person.
Yeah, because who's looking?
The missing women, according to reports, sold sex to feed their intravenous drug habits. Some had HIV, hepatitis, or both. They all left behind their belongings, bank accounts, children in foster care, welfare checks, but it's still a community. Most people knew each other, people stuck up for each other, they cared about each other. These are still people living lives and loving each other. Women who went missing had families and friends, they counted on each other, they were missed. It's not like people just were vanishing into thin air and nobody cared.
Were those the people then who would bring up, hey, we haven't seen her around?
Exactly.
So it wasn't like they did totally go under the radar with their families.
Right.
Because the other sex workers would stick up for them?
Yes, but sometimes it would take a long time because the life of a sex worker is very transient. Like sometimes
that would make sense.
Sometimes you'll go off for a while and just disappear and then show up, and that just happens. So oftentimes when there were missing people reports, the police were just thinking that they would pop up later. And sometimes they would, but a lot of the times they wouldn't. And Willie Pickton became familiar with this area through visits to a rendering plant, which was located there, where he disposed of waste animal parts. Do you know what a rendering plant is?
No, I don't, but if you're disposing animal parts there, it's probably not a place I want to be.
It's not a place you want to be.
Gross and creepy. It's like a place you get murdered, which also makes sense why he's there. Did he put people parts in this? So
yeah, he did.
So. But what is it, though? What do you make? Bricks? Soup? Like, what is this? What is this plant making?
No, so it actually, you bring the unusable parts of animals or whatever waste you have to this place. All of the stuff like guts, blood, fish, entrails, bones, used restaurant grease, all of this just crap you bring to this plant, and they take it, they do whatever they need to do to it, and they basically resell it so that other companies can make products like lipstick, soap, shampoo, and perfume out of it.
Oh, okay. That's gross.
Right?
I hate that. That shouldn't be a thing. But I get that too. That is handy to be like, oh, you're throwing away that extra fat? All right, we'll take it. We'll make some chapstick out of it. Like, I mean,
yeah.
Thrifty, for sure.
Willie Pickton would bring these truckloads full of just big barrels of black goo, and it wasn't checked very well when it would go to the rendering plant, so he could just bring whatever he wanted.
No one was raising any eyebrows at this?
No one was raising...
No one...
Not at first.
That's not suspicious to pull up in this big truck of animal parts?
It wasn't suspicious because that's what everybody that used this plant was doing. He became familiar with the downtown east side because this place was in the downtown east side. He would cruise this area, the 10-block strip called the Low Track. It's part of the same area. He would offer women money and drugs. He would take them back to his farm then. The sex workers actually really liked him. If he found some that he liked, he would take a wad of cash and peel 10s or 20s from it, give it to them, and tell them to go buy drugs. And unfortunately, they saw him doing this as him wanting to help them. They thought he was someone who was generous, kind, like a good guy.
That's so sad.
I know, isn't it?
Especially that, like, they felt like it was kind for him to be their enabler, too. You know, like, not only the fact that he turns out to be a murderer, but that they were so touched that, like, he was actually further making their lives hard.
Yeah, right? So we're going to get into a little bit of his background, just so we can understand why he is so gross.
Okay.
52 years after the first Europeans settled in the area that is now called Port Coquitlam, William Pickton, the great-grandfather of the accused serial killer, so Willie Pickton, his great-grandfather, he bought land near a mental hospital, and he built a farm.
Convenient.
He raised pigs at his farm, and his children grew up, and they raised pigs at this farm, and so did his children's children, all on the same farm. Then, in the late 50s, Willie's parents, Leonard and his wife, Helen Louise, were forced to sell their farm and move to make way for a highway.
Okay.
In 1963, Leonard and Helen Louise bought 40 acres of swamp for a bunch of money, and they towed their farmhouse to this site. They moved their house.
Wow. That's crazy.
And they began raising their children and their pigs.
Maybe this will be offensive. I'm not sure. Could we lump Willie in there with the pigs that they're raising?
Yes.
Is that too far?
I'll throw him in there.
Okay.
He was born in 1949 in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Leonard and Helen Louise also had another son whose name was David and a daughter, Linda. who was not brought up on the farm, but actually in a city where she attended boarding school. Willie would drop out of school at 14, do 6 years as a butcher's apprentice before quitting, and for the rest of his life, he would call himself, quote, a pig man, end quote.
Why would you voluntarily call yourself that?
That's just what he was.
All right,
he's
the pig man. Just a humble pig man.
So we just looked at a picture of this guy, and he's so icky. Like,
you should look him up.
Look up a picture of Robert Willie Pickton, and just, he's
classic serial killer material look.
He really is. So growing up, his friends would call him rat-faced.
That's so sad, but it really fits. Like, it's very accurate. Like,
usually,
I feel bad.
Usually, I do not like talking about people like this, but for some reason, something about this guy just, I mean, maybe it's the fact that he's a serial killer.
That might do it.
Just like, really? Gets under my just ickiness. I don't know. He's just really gross.
I'm not a fan.
But anyways, they all lived on this farm. They grew up on this farm. They all lived on this farm. It stank of blood and butchery. They would raise these pigs. The pigs, they
smell bad.
They smell. They would butcher the pigs on this farm. And the whole family lived in squalor. They rarely bathed. They were covered in all of that farm crap. And they would live this way all the way into adulthood.
Why? Why was that the case? Like, their parents raised them this way?
Mm-hmm.
And like,
Yep, their parents were also really interesting people. I don't know too much about his father, but his mother was quite a character. She had some sort of issue where she would, like, grow facial hair. So she was well known in the community for, like, having serious facial hair on.
That's so funny.
And she would always wear she would wear a long, like, house coat over jeans and these big boots. And
I appreciate that. That's a look.
She didn't have any teeth.
Oh my word, I actually like her.
And she was very, like, brash, and she's just quite a character, yeah.
That's funny.
But anyway, they all lived in this, like, gross, just horrible, really, way of growing up. It doesn't seem... They worked really hard, too. They would go to work in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then they would go to school as kids. And then they would come back and work, and sometimes work all through the night.
Oh my
and
goodness.
Then go back to school. Yeah, it wasn't maybe a great way of growing up.
For kids.
Yeah. So then they grow up, and the boy's father dies in 1978. Their mother followed him closely to the grave in 1979. Then the brothers, who are now in their late 20s, inherit the farm and their parents' assets with their sister. All the kids inherit all of this stuff, and this comes to be a lot of money. It makes them all millionaires.
Wow.
They have a lot of money. And it was around this time when they got all this money that the women began to go missing in alarming numbers from the downtown east side. In 1995, Catherine Gonzalez went missing. A few months later, Catherine Knight went missing, then Dorothy Spence, then Diana Melnick, then Tanya Holnick, then Olivia Williams, then Frances Young, then Stephanie Lane, Helen Hallmark, Janet Henry, and the count doesn't cease until 2001.
Oh my goodness.
It was also around this time that David Pickton built Piggy's Palace, a gross, seedy nightclub.
Ew. I hate that it's called that. I hate their whole thing with pigs.
I know.
Like, that's too perfect in a disgusting, gross way.
So it's like named after their father because people around town would call their father Piggy.
Well, that's kind of cute.
And so they named it Piggy's
also,
Palace.
I don't like it, but it's kind of cute. I don't really like anything that has to do with them and these pigs.
I know.
Just, that grosses me out.
And this place is disgusting. So, David Pickton, he was really kind of in all cuddly with the Hells Angels, which they're a biker gang, but they're known for being sort of on the bad side of the law. They do all this kind of sketchy stuff and drugs. So at this place there's dancing, which is fine, but there's also
not this kind of dance, this is wild stuff.
But there's also, like, a lot of drugs here, just raunchy stuff going on. It's not really the At least it's
Kind
not
of a seedy place.
not the place I want to be, but
Yeah.
apparently it was the place that a lot of people wanted to be because it was really popular. Even the higher town officials would want to come to this place. So there would be police officers here, there would be town politicians among, the sex workers and the drug
Right.
addicts and all of this. So it was kind of, I don't know, it was kind of interesting. Willie would serve barbecue from the pigs that he raised on the farm.
Okay, I like that. That's cool.
The brothers would throw these crazy parties, and Willie, although he was kind of known as a quiet, awkward man, he always enjoyed going to these parties and socializing and roasting his pigs, making barbecue. Keep that in mind for later.
I know, I already was when you said he made barbecue. And I regretted saying that I liked that part and liked that he served barbecue. And I don't anymore with what I'm guessing happens next.
So the police start to feel the pressure from the public. There's pressure from the public, local media outlets, so they finally begin to look into the missing women from the downtown east side. And because of the attempted murder of Wendy Eistetter, Willie was on their radar, and they put him under surveillance. So he's under surveillance, and when he's under surveillance, the numbers of missing women dwindle.
Oh, sketchy.
That's what you would think, right?
Yeah.
But instead of realizing that it's Willie, the police think that the problem has just been solved. So they decide...
that it just went away? That, like, whoever was doing this, oh, it's fine. We don't need to catch him since he stopped.
Yeah,
he
they
can get
think
away
that
with it because
stopped.
he decided to quit.
So they disband the task force. And guess what happens?
Oh, another person goes missing.
Women begin to go missing again. So they start a new task force with the Canadian Royal Mounted Police, and Willie goes to the top of the list because he's connected to the downtown east side, and because he has a violent record due to that attempted murder of Wendy.
And this is not fact, but also probably because of his connection to pigs. And all of this pig stuff.
If you're connected to pigs, I mean...
In this much of a way, if you're connected this much with pigs and a place called Piggy's Palace, then you should be on their radar.
You know what
they
this
should be
kind
watching
of
you like
reminds
a
me
hawk.
of? This kind of reminds me of... Have you ever seen the show Gotham?
No, I haven't.
Oh. Well, there's a character in Gotham who's like a killer, and he's like a killer butcher, but he wears a pig's head as a mask.
So also like Hubie Halloween.
Oh. Yeah,
although he
also
wasn't a
like-
murderer.
But they made you think you would.
They did, and I believed it. Just because of the pig head. So see what I'm saying?
Good movie, Hubie Halloween. Go watch that. Well, finish this episode first and then go watch that. And pigs equal suspects, apparently.
Oh.
And death, yeah. If you see a pig, it's a bad omen.
Yep.
So in 2001, the police start to finally actually take this stuff seriously. They admit there's a serial killer, which is like, okay, finally.
And how many years?
What we've been saying.
Later is this? This is like 6 years at this point,
This is
right?
6 years later from when Wendy was attacked.
Okay.
They think that he might have been, or probably was, attacking and murdering before that, and people were definitely going missing. People have been going missing from this area since the 70s. So it's not only...
Oh my goodness, yeah.
It's not only Willie, but yeah. So finally they're like, okay, we hear you. 46 people are missing at this point.
Oh my word.
And that is from 1995. So after they finally say, okay, we're going to do something about it, another person goes missing 4 days later. And 2 months later, another person goes missing. So then finally, in early 2002, police get a tip that will blow open the case, that blows it wide open. A guy named Scott Chubb, just pause, because that's a great
Let's appreciate
name.
his wonderful name.
Yes. Okay,
Right.
appreciated.
It's been appreciated.
He worked on the farm. He worked for David Pickton. He worked for David Pickton. He called police to trade information for money. He didn't really have a lot of money at that point. So he was hoping that if he gave tips on drug trafficking and illegal guns, that they would give him some money. And they're like, okay. That's all they need to investigate Willie. They are sort of doing a little bit of investigation on Willie, and one of the officers alerts the task force that Willie has priors, because, because of the attack.
Of the whole possible murder thing.
And they are able to get a search warrant to search the entire farm. So...
Oh, I bet this is not good for Willie.
Nope.
What are they going to find here? I'm kind of nervous about it, actually.
So, if you weren't already not wanting to hear stuff, stuff's gonna get pretty icky right now. So just a warning. On February 6th, 2002, police executed a search warrant at the property for reports of illegal firearms. Both Robert and his brother David were arrested, and police were then able to obtain a second warrant based on what they had seen on the farm. They found remains of victims, such as skulls cut in half and stuffed with hands and feet.
Oh my gosh.
They found DNA from 33 women, bloody clothing belonging to a victim, a jawbone and teeth belonging to a victim.
Oh my word.
They found personal belongings of missing women. In Willie's trailer, they found a pair of night vision goggles,
Creepy.
2 pairs of faux fur-lined handcuffs, which, okay, that's fine.
Strange.
I
But
mean,
alright.
No kink shaming, but maybe combined with everything else.
Yeah,
it's
probably not a good look
like-
with the skulls with the hands in them. But
Yeah. They found a syringe with 3 milliliters of blue liquid and something called Spanish fly aphrodisiac. And this is the thing that really was horrible to me, if all of that wasn't horrible enough. They found a .22 revolver with a dildo attached to the barrel. And it had been shot through.
That's awful.
And they found 357 Magnum rounds and photos of a garbage can containing the remains of a victim.
Why would you take a picture of that? Aren't you, worried they'll find that, like they just did? And that will be part of what gets you sentenced?
I guess he just didn't care.
But also, why would you need to remember that? What would make that, worthy of commemorating with a photo?
I have no idea. I don't know.
That's just really strange to me. Really weird.
I don't know, but serial killers do often have a thing where they
have,
want to
a
keep
catalog
stuff,
of, their
right?
victims.
Yeah.
Because usually aren't they obsessed in some weird way with either what they've done or, something?
Yeah. And Willie it's weird. It seems like he just really doesn't care about their lives. Obviously, any serial killer doesn't care about other people's lives, but Willie doesn't seem like he cares about life at all. His own, other people's. He just doesn't. There's a brain thing happening there, I think.
Yeah, there must be.
At the trial, a videotape of Pickton's friend Scott Chubb was shown, saying that Pickton had told him a good way to kill a female heroin addict was to inject her with windshield washer fluid. A second tape was played, in which an associate of his named Andrew Bellwood said Pickton mentioned killing prostitutes by handcuffing and strangling them, then bleeding and gutting them before feeding them to pigs.
Oh, that makes me so sad. That's just awful.
Isn't that awful? According to another witness on tape, Pickton had claimed that he brought his victims, who were all sex workers, to the farm, handcuffed them, raped them, killed them by strangling them, bled and gutted them, ran them through a wood chipper, and then fed their remains to his pigs.
Why did he tell all these people this? He really... I am, actually shocked that it took this long for this guy to get caught. Because,
Right?
it seems like he told quite a few witnesses, different witnesses, about these really awful ways that he either could kill someone or did kill someone.
Yeah.
And, no one said anything.
And what do you do if someone comes to you and says, hey, the best way to kill a female sex worker is to inject her with windshield wiper fluid? I mean, and do you think it's a joke? Do you
want to pry?
What
or
do you do?
Yeah,
That just...
Especially if you are their friend.
But it definitely raises red flags.
Oh, for sure.
Another claim is that the victims were ground, the resulting mince was mixed in with the pork mince from the farm, and the packages were given to Pickton's friends and family, because he was known for giving meat around to his friends and family, and I mentioned, the barbecue. Yeah.
No. Oh, that's disgusting.
Robert and David were also proprietors of another business called P&B Salvage near Vancouver. In 1999, Canadian police received a tip that Robert kept human flesh in freezers on this property. Though a warrant was secured, no search was ever carried out.
Why? Oh my
Because
goodness.
they didn't care about the victims.
Yeah.
And I mean, okay, there might have been other factors at play, just to be fair.
But that does seem really odd. But I will say, like you said, I am not an expert in the law. I don't know if something came up or something. But that just seems very strange that you have the warrant and people have said there's human flesh and you never check it out. You never even, like, check it out?
Yeah. Especially if you have the warrant. If you thought it was serious enough to get a warrant.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, to me, says, well, was something else going on? Like,
was someone in on it? Like,
were they paid off? I mean,
I
totally
don't know.
speculation, but that's odd to me.
Weird.
So forensic analysis was very difficult because the bodies of the victims were just everywhere. They may have been left to decompose, they were possibly allowed to be eaten by insects and pigs. During the early days of the excavations on the farm, forensic anthropologists brought in heavy equipment, including two 50-foot flat conveyor belts and soil sifters to try to find traces of remains all throughout the soil on the farm.
Wow.
Because everything was just that separated, which is just
that
horrible.
decomposed. Wow.
And there were so many bodies and so many different body parts that they couldn't tell all of the time who was who and what was what. On March 10th, 2004, it was revealed that human flesh may have been ground up and mixed with pork from the farm. Willie has also said that he brought body parts to the rendering plant, West Coast Reduction. So he brought bodies to that plant. So there might have been body parts in lipsticks and cosmetics and all of these things all across Canada and the US.
That's awful.
Isn't that horrible?
That's disgusting.
Just like an actual horror story.
Yeah, it really is.
So, when Pickton was arrested, he was put in a cell with an undercover cop who was supposed to be his cellmate. He told this guy that he had wanted to kill one more person in order to bring his victim count up to an even 50. Which suggests that he's responsible for 49 murders.
Oh my word. So earlier when it said that there had been like 46 different people missing, do they think he was responsible for all of those 46?
He couldn't have been responsible for all of those, but there must have been more. It must have added to it, or their count was wrong, or he's blowing it up to
make himself look good to his cellmate. I don't really know if that makes you look good to your cellmate.
But he basically confesses here. Right? I mean, he's saying...
Yeah.
And there's just a ton of evidence that he's very, very guilty.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if you are offended that we're laughing or sort of giggling through this, but it's a really kind of a tough one.
And this is not a laugh that's like, this is funny. This is a laugh like, this is uncomfortable stuff. This is like gross and terrible, but important to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's
like a laugh of, I cannot believe some person has actually done this.
Right. So that's where we're going to leave it for this episode, but this is actually going to be a two-parter. So join us next week to hear a little bit more about Willie Pickton and more about the missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada and the US. And is anybody out there who met Willie Pickton? Some people knew him, and I heard a story about a girl who worked in Starbucks who David Pickton would come in all the time, and she just described him as this gross guy. She never wanted to serve him.
Yeah. I know people like that. Oh, that's actually awful, though, because we have someone at Starbucks that, like, does some very creepy things, like, to the baristas. Yeah, and so, I don't know.
Keep your eyes on him. If he ever smells like pig, if you get a whiff of pig, then
we know. Then it's for sure.
So, is anybody out there? This podcast is written and produced by Sophie Robertson Cormier and hosted by Sophie and her sister, Rachael Richards. If you liked that episode, Please make sure to like us on Facebook and Instagram, and share our podcast with your spooky weird friends. Thanks, and spook you next time!
Say it loud for the people at the back.